The morning sun cast long shadows across the Galactic Military Academy's primary training ground, and Instructor Zeph'tal stood with his 4 arms crossed, watching his mixed-species cadets line up with what he generously called military precision. The Altarian cadets moved like clockwork, their crystalline exoskeletons clicking in perfect unison. The Vorthan students flowed into formation like liquid mercury, each step calculated to the microsecond. Even the hulking Gorvak recruits, despite their reputation for being denser than neutron star material, managed to arrange themselves in neat rows without stepping on anyone. Then there was Marcus Kane. The human cadet slouched into position roughly 3 seconds after everyone else, his uniform somehow already wrinkled despite the fact that Academy laundry systems were designed to keep fabric crisp for exactly 72 standard hours. His dark hair stuck up at an angle that defied both gravity and military regulations, and he had that particular expression humans wore when they were thinking about something completely unrelated to the task at hand. Zeph'tal's voice boomed across the training field, his secondary vocal cords adding that distinctive harmonic resonance that made lesser species quiver. Today we practice the fundamental principle of coordinated equipment deployment. You will demonstrate the wait for zero protocol. 47 alien heads nodded in perfect synchronization. Marcus Kane yawned. Zeph'tal's left eye twitched, a nervous habit he'd developed since humans had been admitted to the Academy. The protocol is simple, even for those of you with limited cognitive processing. He gestured toward the row of standard-issue plasma rifles mounted on the weapons rack. On my countdown from 5 to 0, you will retrieve your weapon, activate the power cell, and assume firing position. You will not, under any circumstances, touch your equipment until I reach 0. Is this concept clear? Sir, yes, sir, came the thunderous reply from 47 throats, mandibles, and vocal sacs. Sure thing, teach, came Marcus's casual response, delivered with a shrug that somehow managed to convey both agreement and complete disregard for authority. Zeph'tal's right eye joined his left in the twitching symphony. In his 12 years as a drill instructor, he had trained Gorvak berserkers, Altarian perfectionist engineers, and even a class of Nethrani assassins who communicated entirely through interpretive violence. None of them had prepared him for humans and their bewildering approach to, well, everything. Very well, Zeph'tal announced, pulling out his chronometer with theatrical precision. The cadets will demonstrate flawless timing and absolute obedience. Remember, timing in combat operations can mean the difference between victory and becoming space debris. We begin the countdown in 10 seconds. The alien cadets tensed like coiled springs, their various appendages poised for perfectly coordinated movement. Breathing patterns synchronized, heartbeats aligned, even their brain waves probably matched, if such things could be measured across species barriers. Marcus Kane scratched his nose and looked around the training ground like he was seeing it for the first time. Beginning countdown. Zeph'tal announced, 5. 47 alien bodies shifted into ready position with mechanical precision. 4. Muscles tensed, claws extended, energy fields hummed with anticipation. 3. And that was when Marcus Kane, in a display of human unpredictability that would later be studied by military strategists across the galaxy, grabbed his plasma rifle 2 full counts early. The sound that emerged from 47 alien throats was something between a gasp, a wheeze, and the noise a deflating balloon makes when you let it go without tying the end. It was the collective sound of military precision meeting human chaos, and frankly, it wasn't pretty. Marcus had not only grabbed his weapon early, but he'd also managed to activate the power cell with a casual flick of his thumb, as if he were turning on a portable music device rather than priming a weapon capable of melting through 6 inches of reinforced durasteel. The plasma rifle hummed to life with a cheerful blue glow that seemed almost mocking in the face of such blatant protocol violation. 2. 1 3. Zeph'tal continued his countdown, his voice strangled somewhere between professional duty and the overwhelming desire to question every life choice that had led him to this moment. The other cadets remained frozen in their ready positions, their training warring with their shock. The Alterians' crystalline faces managed to convey horror despite having no actual facial features. The Vorthons rippled with what could only be described as second-hand embarrassment. Even the Gorvoks, whose emotional range typically extended from hungry to angry, seemed bewildered by this unprecedented breach of military etiquette. 1. Marcus, apparently oblivious to the cosmic wrongness of his actions, he hefted the rifle and checked its power readings with the same casual interest someone might show when examining a sandwich. He even tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether the weapon met his personal standards for military hardware. 0. The word exploded from Zeph'tal's throat with enough force to rattle windows 3 buildings away. 47 aliens moved with flawless synchronization, grabbing their weapons and activating power cells in a display of coordinated perfection that would have made military historians weep with joy. Marcus Kane, meanwhile, was already shouldering his rifle and scanning the horizon for targets, completely unaware that he had just committed what amounted to tactical heresy. That was when the malfunction happened. The Academy's weapons were designed with multiple safety features, including a synchronized activation system that prevented power cells from fully engaging until all rifles in a training group were armed simultaneously. It was a brilliant piece of engineering that prevented accidents, ensured uniform training conditions, and maintained the delicate balance of controlled military exercises. It was also completely unprepared for humans and their delightful habit of doing things their own way. Marcus's early activation had confused the synchronization system, which was now trying to reconcile the fact that one weapon had been armed for nearly 4 seconds while the others were just coming online. The result was a spectacular cascade failure that sent feedback through every rifle on the rack. The explosion wasn't dangerous, just loud enough to wake the dead and bright enough to temporarily blind anyone looking directly at it. What was dangerous was the way Marcus instinctively threw his arm up to shield his eyes, forgetting that he was holding a weapon that had suddenly become about as stable as a caffeinated Gorvak during mating season. The rifle bucked in his grip with enough force to snap his wrist backward at an angle that made several alien cadets emit sympathetic whimpers. There was a distinct crack, like the sound of someone stepping on a particularly large insect, followed by Marcus dropping the weapon and shaking his hand with a bemused expression. "Ha," he said, examining his clearly broken wrist with the same mild interest he'd shown the weapon readings. "That's new?" The training ground fell silent, except for the dying hum of overloaded power cells and the faint crackling of residual plasma discharge. 47 alien cadets stared at Marcus Kane, who was cradling his obviously injured wrist and looking around like he was trying to figure out what all the fuss was about. Zeph'tal's 4 arms hung at his sides, his chronometer forgotten in his grip. His species had evolved on a world where precision was survival, where split-second timing meant the difference between finding food and becoming it. The concept of deliberately acting early was so alien to his thinking that his brain was struggling to process what he'd just witnessed. Cadet Kane, he finally managed, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 frustrated drill instructors throughout galactic history. "Yeah, Instructor?" Marcus replied cheerfully, as if having a broken wrist was just another minor inconvenience, like running out of coffee or discovering your favorite shirt had a stain. "Would you care to explain why you activated your weapon at 3 instead of waiting for 0 as specifically instructed?" Marcus looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Well," he said, shifting his broken wrist to his other hand, "you got to 3, so I figured it was close enough." Close enough. 2 words that would haunt Zeph'tal's dreams for cycles to come. The Academy's medical bay smelled like antiseptic and barely contained alien frustration. Marcus Kane sat on the examination table, swinging his legs like a child waiting for a treat, while the medical scanner hummed over his freshly broken wrist. The device was designed to work on 17 different species, but it seemed particularly confused by human bone density and kept emitting small beeps of electronic bewilderment. "Old still, Cadet," Dr. Thalin muttered, her 6 delicate arms manipulating the scanner controls with practiced precision. The Altarian medic had seen her share of training injuries, but nothing quite like this. Most species came to her facility writhing in agony, demanding immediate pain relief, and generally behaving like civilized beings should when their skeletal structure had been compromised. Marcus was humming, actually humming, as if having his wrist bones realigned was some sort of pleasant background activity to accompany his little tune. Dr. Thalen's crystalline features couldn't display expression, but her body language radiated professional confusion. Zeph'tal paced the small medical bay like a caged predator, his forearms gesticulating wildly as he tried to process what had happened on his training ground. "Explain to me, Cadet Kane, how 3 sounds anything like 0 in any language spoken by any sentient species in this galaxy." "Well," Marcus said, pausing his humming to consider the question seriously, "they're both numbers, so that's something they have in common." The instructor's left eye resumed its twitching with renewed vigor. "They are not the same number. They are not even close to being the same number. 0 means wait. 3 means continue waiting for 2 more counts. Sure, but I was ready at 3, so why wait around?" Marcus shrugged, then winced slightly as the movement jostled his injured wrist. It seemed like a waste of time. Dr. Thalen's scanner finally gave up trying to comprehend human physiology and simply projected a holographic image of Marcus's bones. The fracture was clean but definitely present, a hairline crack that should have had any reasonable being demanding narcotics and a comfortable bed. "Cadet Kane," she said in her precise, clinical voice, "you have sustained a significant fracture. On a pain scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst agony you can conceive, how would you rate your current discomfort?" Marcus examined his wrist thoughtfully. "Maybe a 4? It's like when you bite your lip while eating, but it keeps going for longer." Zeph'tal stopped pacing and stared at the human. 4. Cadet Brixnok fractured his exoskeleton last month and rated his pain as a 9. He required 3 days of intensive care and a full psychological evaluation. "Yeah, but Brix is kind of dramatic," Marcus replied with the casual air of someone discussing the weather. "Remember when he got that splinter and acted like he was dying? Humans get splinters all the time. We just pull them out and keep going." The medical scanner beeped again, this time displaying Marcus's vital signs. His heart rate was slightly elevated, probably from the mild annoyance of having to sit still, but his stress hormones were barely above baseline. For comparison, Zeph'tal's readings would have indicated imminent cardiac failure. "This is impossible," the instructor muttered, running his hands through the gill slits on his neck. "No species treats injury with such casual indifference. Pain is a survival mechanism. It tells you something is wrong." "Something is wrong," Marcus agreed cheerfully. "My wrist is broken. But worrying about it won't make it heal faster, so why stress?" Admiral Corvain's office had been designed to intimidate. The walls displayed commendations from a dozen species, tactical holographs of famous battles, and ceremonial weapons that could probably level a small moon. The massive Vorthan admiral sat behind his desk like a living shadow, his form rippling with barely contained authority as he reviewed the datapad containing Marcus Kane's increasingly thick file. "Incident Report 17, he read aloud, his voice carrying the weight of deep space itself. Cadet Kane attempted to improve the obstacle course by taking what he called a shortcut through the plasma barrier designed to simulate hazardous terrain. When questioned, he stated that real enemies wouldn't politely wait for him to go around obstacles. Professor Vexnari, the Academy's leading expert on tactical psychology, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Her species communicated through complex pheromone releases, and the current mixture she was producing roughly translated to confused academic panic with undertones of intellectual curiosity. Incident Report 23, the Admiral continued, his tone growing more incredulous with each word. Cadet Kane disassembled his assigned shelter during survival training because, and I quote, "It was boring just sitting there. He then rebuilt it as what he described as a trebuchet that you can sleep in. When asked why anyone would need a siege weapon capable of launching projectiles while providing overnight accommodation, He replied that he might need to throw something really far while camping. Commander Flithneck, whose species had evolved from pack hunters with an instinctive understanding of tactical coordination, it made a sound that could charitably be described as a whimper. Admiral, with respect, perhaps we should consider transferring the human to a different training program. One more suited to independent operators. You mean kick him out? Professor Vexnari translated helpfully. I mean assign him to a role where his unique approach to military doctrine won't endanger other cadets, Flithneck clarified, though his tone suggested he absolutely meant kick him out. Admiral Corvain set down the datapad and leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his considerable bulk. Gentlemen, colleagues, fellow educators of the future's military leaders, he began, his words measured and deliberate. In my 47 years of service, I have commanded fleets, negotiated peace treaties, and personally led boarding actions against enemy vessels. I have seen tactics that defied conventional wisdom succeed against impossible odds. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. I have also seen conventional wisdom fail spectacularly when faced with unconventional problems. The question before us is not whether Cadet Kane follows protocol. The question is whether his inability to follow protocol might actually be useful. Meanwhile, 3 floors below in the cadet common area, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Yuki Tanaka sat surrounded by a mixed group of alien cadets, all of whom seemed united in their bewilderment about her fellow human. But why would he activate the weapon early? Asked Cadet Zorthak, his massive Gorvak frame somehow managing to convey delicate confusion. The instructions were clear. Wait for 0, not wait for 3. 0. Yuki sighed, running her hands through her short black hair. Explaining human behavior to aliens was like trying to describe color to someone who had never seen light. Look, you guys all come from species that survived by being precise, right? Following patterns, maintaining group coordination, doing exactly what worked before. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. Humans survived by being unpredictable, she continued. On our world, the predators learned our patterns. The prey learned our hunting strategies. Even the weather seemed determined to kill us in new and creative ways. So we adapted by never doing the same thing twice. Cadbrick's knock, his exoskeleton still bearing the medical patches from his previous dramatic injury, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. But surely there must be some logic to his actions? Some underlying pattern we could learn to predict. Yuki laughed, the sound somehow both affectionate and exasperated. You want to know Marcus's pattern? His pattern is that he doesn't have a pattern. That's what makes him dangerous. Back in the Admiral's office, the debate continued. Perhaps, Admiral Corvain said slowly, it's time we tested whether human unpredictability is a bug or a feature. The Academy's Advanced Combat Simulation Chamber was a marvel of military engineering. Holographic projectors could recreate any battlefield condition from vacuum warfare to toxic swamp combat, complete with environmental hazards, enemy AI that adapted in real time, and pain feedback systems that made simulated injuries feel uncomfortably real without causing actual damage. Admiral Corvain stood in the observation deck, surrounded by the Academy's senior staff, watching as 48 cadets prepared for what they believed was a routine tactical exercise. Only the faculty knew this was actually an elaborate test designed specifically to measure one human's impact on group dynamics. Scenario parameters are loaded, announced Lieutenant Bricksnock, his mandibles clicking as he operated the simulation controls. Urban warfare environment, hostile territory extraction mission. The cadets must navigate 12 city blocks, retrieve a simulated intelligence package, and reach the extraction point within 37 minutes. Professor Vexnari leaned forward, her pheromone signature shifting to what roughly translated as academic excitement mixed with morbid curiosity. And the enemy AI, programmed with standard tactical responses, Bricksnock replied. It will analyze cadet movement patterns and adapt accordingly. The simulation has been run 47 times by previous classes with a 73% success rate. Down in the simulation chamber, Zeph'tal addressed his cadets with the kind of precision that had made him legendary among drill instructors. Listen carefully. You will move in formation Beta 7, maintain communication protocols at all times, and follow the predetermined route exactly as programmed. Timing is critical. You have 37 minutes, not 36, not 38. Any deviation from the plan will result in mission failure and very unpleasant evaluations. The cadets nodded in unison, their various forms of acknowledgement creating a symphony of military precision. Except for Marcus Kane, who was examining his recently healed wrist with the fascination of someone discovering a new body part. Cadet Kane. Zeph'tal barked. "Are you paying attention?" "Sure," Marcus replied, looking up with that particular human expression that managed to convey both complete understanding and absolute disregard for authority. 37 minutes. Follow the route. Don't mess up. Got it. Yes. The instructor's eye began its familiar twitch, but before he could respond, the simulation activated. The sterile chamber transformed into a war-torn cityscape, complete with crumbling buildings, abandoned vehicles, and the distant sound of weapons fire. The cadets moved with flawless coordination. The Alterians took point, their crystalline forms perfectly suited for detecting environmental hazards. The Vorthans flowed through the rubble like liquid mercury, scouting alternate routes. The Gorvaks provided heavy support, their massive frames loaded with enough firepower to level a small building. And Marcus wandered slightly off to the left, poking at interesting debris. Maintain formation. Zeph'tal's voice crackled through their communication devices. Cadet Kane, return to your assigned position. Yeah, in a second, Marcus replied, examining what appeared to be a piece of simulated concrete. This building looks weird. The squad continued forward according to plan, following the predetermined route that had been calculated to avoid known enemy positions while maintaining optimal time efficiency. It was a thing of beauty, really, watching species from across the galaxy work together with such seamless precision. Which was probably why none of them noticed the enemy AI had been tracking their movement pattern and was currently positioning an ambush exactly 17 meters ahead. The AI had analyzed 47 previous runs of this simulation. It knew cadets always followed the optimal route. It had calculated their speed, predicted their timing, and prepared a devastating crossfire that would catch them at the most vulnerable point in their advance. What it hadn't calculated was Marcus Kane stopping to examine interesting architecture. "This is wrong," Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the tactical chatter with the casual confidence of someone commenting on the weather. "What is wrong, Cadet?" Zeph'tal asked, though his tone suggested he really didn't want to know. "This building," Marcus continued, pointing at the structure he'd been investigating. "See how it's damaged? Blast patterns all wrong for the weapons they're supposed to be using here. Plus, there's fresh debris on the south side but not the north. Someone's been using this area recently?" In the observation deck, Admiral Corvain leaned forward with interest. "He's analyzing the environment independently?" "Apparently," Professor Vexnari replied, her pheromones now broadcasting something that might have been professional respect mixed with alarm. Being down in the simulation, Marcus had wandered even further from the prescribed route, following some internal logic that made perfect sense to him and absolutely none to anyone else. "Hey guys," he called out, "you might want to avoid the main street for the next bit." "Contain. Return to formation immediately," Zeph'tal commanded. "But there's definitely someone waiting in that building with the blue shutters," Marcus continued, apparently oblivious to the rapidly escalating authority crisis. "And probably in the alley behind the market stall. The dust patterns are all wrong." That was when the enemy AI, confident in its perfectly laid trap, triggered its ambush exactly as planned. Weapons fire erupted from the building with blue shutters and the alley behind the market stall, targeting the exact position where the cadet squad would have been if they had followed the plan. Instead, Marcus's seemingly random wandering had pulled the entire formation 3 seconds behind schedule and 15 meters off course. The devastating crossfire that should have caught them in a killing field instead struck empty air and holographic rubble. Contact. Yuki shouted, immediately returning fire at the enemy positions Marcus had identified. The rest of the squad reacted with professional speed, but it was Marcus who had already moved to flank the ambush, having somehow intuited the enemy's secondary positions before they revealed themselves. The fight was over in 47 seconds. Mission accomplished with 0 casualties and a perfect score. In the observation deck, the silence was profound. The silence stretched for approximately 17 seconds, which in military academic circles qualified as an eternity. Admiral Corvain was the first to speak, his deep voice carrying a note of something that might have been wonder if admirals were allowed to experience such emotions. Run the simulation again, he ordered quietly. Sir? Lieutenant Brick's Knox mandibles clicked in confusion. Run it again. Same parameters, same enemy AI, same tactical scenario. They ran it 6 more times. In every single iteration, Marcus Kane did something different. Not randomly, but responding to environmental cues that the other cadets couldn't see, following patterns that existed only in his human brain, and consistently identifying threats that the enemy AI thought were perfectly concealed. By the 7th run, the AI had essentially given up trying to predict where the human would be and had started setting traps based on where Marcus had gone previously. This backfired spectacularly when Marcus, apparently sensing the AI's frustration, began deliberately avoiding his own previous routes. It's learning, Professor Vexnari whispered, her pheromone signature now broadcasting pure scientific fascination. The human is counter-adapting to an adaptive enemy system. Down in the debriefing room, Zeph'tal sat across from Marcus Kane, staring at the human cadet like he was a puzzle missing several crucial pieces. His 4 arms were folded, his posture rigid, but his expression had shifted from frustration to something approaching respect. Cadet Kane, he began carefully, I need you to explain something to me. Sure, Instructor, Marcus replied, apparently unaware that he had just revolutionized tactical doctrine. What's up? Yeah. Why don't you ever wait for 0? Marcus considered the question with the same thoughtful expression he'd worn while examining his broken wrist. Well, he said finally, if you always wait for 0, then anyone watching you knows exactly when you're going to move. They can time their attacks, set their traps, plan their responses. But if you move at 3 or 5 or sometimes even before the countdown starts, then nobody knows what you're going to do, including your own team, Zeph'tal pointed out. Yeah, but my team adapts, Marcus shrugged. Enemies usually don't, at least not fast enough. The instructor leaned back in his chair, a gesture that would have been impossible for his species a few months ago, but which he'd unconsciously learned from watching humans. And the building analysis? The dust patterns and blast damage assessment? Oh, that's just paying attention, Marcus said dismissively. On Earth, if you don't notice when something's wrong with your environment, you become part of the food chain pretty quick. It's basic survival stuff. Basic survival stuff. As if intuitive tactical analysis was something every species should naturally possess. 2 hours later, Admiral Corvain was announcing the Academy's first major curriculum revision in 3 centuries. Human cadets would now receive specialized training designed to enhance their natural unpredictability rather than suppress it. Other species would learn to work with human tactical flexibility rather than despite it. And in Training Ground 7, Instructor Zeph'tal stood before his morning drill class, attempting to implement the new adaptive timing protocols that Admiral Corvain had optimistically suggested he try. Cadets, he announced, trying to inject some human-style casualness into his voice, today we will practice equipment deployment using flexible countdown parameters. He paused, took a deep breath, and consulted his notes, beginning countdown. 5. Or maybe 4. Actually, you know what? Just grab your weapons whenever you feel like it. The resulting chaos was spectacular, but oddly enough, nobody got hurt. Marcus Kane, watching from the sidelines while his wrist finished healing, nodded approvingly. Not bad, Instructor, he called out. You're getting the hang of it.